Now I want to tell you the difference between evidence and elaboration. So we're going to take these notes first, and then we're going to be talking about paraphrasing and quoting quickly and the difference between those. I'm going to give you some evidence-based terminology in these notes as well. And then I'm going to show you how I would do it with our model. So the first thing I want to do is, what is evidence versus elaboration? A lot of times, especially on the rubrics, you'll see evidence and elaboration, 4 points. Well, what does that mean? This is what they mean. I am going to divide this into 4 boxes. And then I have my title. So I'm actually going to get another colored pen. And I'm going to write evidence is inside the text only. You get it straight from the text. And actually zoom in a little bit. It is a fact. It could be a definition, a specific detail, an example, a quote, a statistic, which is like data, like 50% of people, da 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 da. We have numbers or other information, other proof. Evidence proves why you're correct. Here are some words that we might use to introduce evidence. So this is evidence-based terms. How would I introduce my evidence? How do I say it's evidence? I could say the author stated, in paragraph blank it said, according to the text, sorry about that. From the text I know that. For example, in the text, based on what I read, and you always want to use the name of the article or passage 1, passage 2 when you're doing this. The author in passage 1 stated, in paragraph 5 of passage 1 it said, according to the text or according to passage 1, from passage 1 I know, things like that, okay? So pause that if you need that. And then I'm going to move on to elaboration. So elaboration is outside of the text, but it's connected to what's said. So it might be more information that you get to talk about your evidence. So this is something that is not inside the text, but it's connected to what you read. So it could be a fact from another source. It could be an interpretation, like how do you understand it? It could be a thought, a personal connection, a personal reaction, like emotions. It could be an evaluation, or what do you think? It could be a comment on what you read, or it could be more explanation. So pause that and copy that down. Okay. And then ways to introduce. How to introduce elaboration. This makes me think. However, if this reminds me of, this means, this demonstrates, I remember, this makes sense because. So these are ways that you can introduce your elaboration. Okay. So the next thing that I'm going to introduce to you is going to be paraphrasing versus quoting. And we're going to do that on the back. Okay, so how can I give that evidence? We have paraphrasing versus quoting. Both of them, you're going to be using those evidence-based terminology. We use both to explain further and to provide evidence to support your opinion. So paraphrasing is using your own words. You do not use quotations. You're just putting it in your own words. Here's an example. According to the text, and I'm going to use the Ashley Merriman from earlier. Ashley Merriman wrote an article that talked about how losing is good for kids. The actual quote I will write down here, but this is my paraphrasing. I still used according to the text, and I'm going to show you how it would be different with the quote. So a direct quote is writing exactly what the text is saying, but you're putting it in quotations. If you're going to do a direct quote, you have to put it in quotations. Otherwise, it's considered taking it and putting it as your own words. So this is copying exactly what the author is saying and putting it in quotes. Here's my example. And I'm going to use the same exact quote that I used here, so you can see the difference. All right, the quote says, Ashley Merriman. Okay, so according to the text, Ashley Merriman from New York Times discusses this topic. She thinks adults need to help kids overcome failure. So this is the direct quote, exactly word for word. It doesn't have to be something that someone said directly, like she didn't say in the article, they didn't quote her exactly. So, but this is the piece that I took out from the article, word for word. So if I'm gonna do that, I have to use quotes. So that is the difference between quoting and paraphrasing. You need to do a mixture of both, and that is what we're going to be using in our essay practice. Last part of adding to the body, you have this, Dare to Revise attached. I'm going to cut it out. This is what we added earlier when we did the transition and the details. So I'm actually going to glue this right in here. And this is going to be right next to the paraphrasing versus quoting. Okay. All right, so once we have that set, we are going to add a little bit of evidence to this. In the article, we're going to look at the top. In the article, it talks about James Harrison. This includes professional football player James Harrison. So I'm going to use him here. If you look right here, it says, this includes professional football player James Harrison. He believes that just because someone shows effort in a game does not mean that it should be rewarded all the time. This could lead to a sense of entitlement that is not deserved. So I think I'm going to include that in there. I think I'm going to put that right here. According to James Harrison, according to James Harrison, a professional football player, it's supposed to be a P. Sports shouldn't be played. Should be a quote. Sports shouldn't be played for a trophy. So this is a direct quote. But to show recognition of one's skill or improvement of a skill. So basically, you should get an award not for showing up, but for improving, working hard, and doing well in the sport. So that is my evidence for this paragraph. Now I already have her research shows that adults need to help kids overcome failure. This is a paraphrase. Oop, this should say they. This is a paraphrase. And then the last one doesn't have anything. And I think that we should also go back to James Harrison. And he says right here, actually I'm going to put according to professional football player James Harrison, it can be beneficial. Nope, it can be beneficial right there. He says that just because someone showed some effort does not mean it should be rewarded all the time. Okay. Let's see if oh, it's a little blurry. I will post a picture of it finished down below. There's our evidence and elaboration now. The next step would be to add our conclusion, which we'll be working on next week.